Hello, everyone, and welcome to our philosophy series. Today, we're diving into one of the most radical and interesting philosophical perspectives from ancient India, the Charvaka philosophy, specifically focusing on their reasons for rejecting inference and religious testimonies as valid means of knowledge. We'll explore their skepticism towards non-sensory information, the doubts they raised about the reliability of inference, and their dismissal of scriptural authority, especially the Vedas. So let's get started with the Charvaka view and try to unpack why they saw inference and religious testimonies as problematic. The Charvaka School, sometimes referred to as Lokayata, is one of the oldest materialistic philosophical traditions in India. The Charvakas were skeptical thinkers who emphasized direct sensory experience as the only reliable source of knowledge. They are unique among the classical Indian schools of thought because they rejected not only the spiritual worldview of the time but also key epistemological tools that other Indian philosophies commonly accepted. For them, sense perception, what we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch was the only solid foundation for knowledge. Anything beyond that, especially inference and testimony, was viewed with suspicion. Let's start with the Charvaka critique of inference. Now, in philosophy, inference is a way of reaching conclusions based on reasoning. For example, if we see smoke on a hill, we might infer that there's a fire. We don't actually see the fire, but through reasoning, we arrive at the conclusion based on past experience. Smoke usually means fire. The Charvakas, however, argued that inference is often unreliable. Their point is that inference relies on assumptions, and without direct sensory confirmation, those assumptions can be mistaken. Think about it this way: you might see smoke and assume it's caused by fire, but in reality, there could be other causes. It might be a dust cloud or steam. This uncertainty, the Charvakas argued, makes inference a shaky foundation for knowledge. The Charvakas didn't entirely deny that inference could sometimes work. They recognized that we use inference in daily life, but they were very critical of accepting inferential knowledge when it comes to matters beyond what we can confirm through the senses. For instance, they would argue that we should not accept conclusions about things like the soul, afterlife, or karma, concepts that cannot be directly experienced based solely on inference. If we cannot directly see or sense these things, how can we be sure they exist? This skepticism led the Charvakas to limit valid knowledge to what is immediately available through the senses, avoiding beliefs that rely solely on inference. Now, let's turn to the second major point of Charvaka philosophy, their dismissal of religious testimonies, particularly the Vedas. The Vedas are ancient Indian scriptures that contain hymns, philosophy, and rituals, and are regarded as sacred and authoritative by many Indian philosophical traditions. For schools like Vedanta, Mimamsa, and even certain branches of Buddhism and Jainism, the Vedas hold an unquestionable place of importance as sources of spiritual and ethical knowledge. However, the Charvakas took a very different stance. They argued that testimonies from religious texts or spiritual authorities cannot be considered reliable means of knowledge. Why? For them, accepting testimony, especially from something as abstract as the Vedas, requires faith in the authority of those who created and transmitted these texts. The Charvakas questioned how anyone could verify the truth of statements about gods, souls, and cosmic law when these things cannot be observed directly through the senses. If a claim can't be directly verified, the Charvakas believed it should be dismissed as speculation or opinion, not knowledge. The Charvakas also pointed out that scriptures like the Vedas often contradict each other. Different Vedic hymns or verses sometimes offer conflicting views on gods, rituals, or moral duties. The Charvakas saw this as another reason to doubt the reliability of religious testimony. For them, knowledge needed to be consistent and verifiable through direct experience, not based on conflicting, abstract verses that could not be confirmed. To illustrate this, let's consider an example. Imagine someone claims there is an invisible, all-powerful being who controls everything in the universe. According to Charvaka thought, we should question this claim by asking, can we observe this being directly with our senses? Can we see, hear, or touch this entity? If the answer is no, then from the Charvaka perspective, there is no reason to believe in such an entity. The claim, in their view, lacks a foundation in observable reality. In contrast, let's take a sensory experience, such as feeling the warmth of sunlight. This sensation of warmth is something we directly perceive. There's no guesswork involved and no need for faith. To the Charvakas, this direct experience is a far more valid source of knowledge than any abstract testimony about supernatural beings or realms we cannot observe. This radical skepticism toward non-sensory knowledge led Charvakas to question not only religious beliefs, but also the entire structure of spiritual practices rituals, and moral obligations rooted in supernatural claims. They argued that without sensory confirmation, people were merely following traditions based on assumptions or cultural conditioning rather than true knowledge. This perspective naturally put them at odds with other philosophical schools that valued the Vedas and religious practices as essential paths to truth and liberation. For example, followers of Vedanta or the Mimamsa school would argue that the Vedas provide insights into eternal truths and moral duties. But the Charvakas countered that if such truths cannot be verified through direct experience, they should not be accepted. In fact, they went so far as to argue that any theory of ethics or purpose in life should be based on observable, practical realities, not religious doctrines. In summary, the Charvaka philosophy challenged the accepted ways of knowing in ancient India. By rejecting inference as unreliable without sensory evidence, they questioned the assumptions underlying belief in things like the soul, karma, and an afterlife. By dismissing religious testimonies, they cast doubt on the authority of the Vedas and similar sacred texts, arguing that knowledge should be grounded in direct, observable experience. The Charvaka school was radical for its time, questioning long-held spiritual traditions and the trust placed in scriptural authority. While their skepticism may seem extreme to some, it highlights an important question: should we accept claims that we cannot directly verify through experience? For the Charvakas, the answer was a clear no. In their view, a truly reliable knowledge system is one that is grounded in the tangible, in what we can see, hear, touch, and understand through the senses. Through their criticisms, the Charvakas set the stage for discussions about knowledge and belief that continue to resonate. They remind us of the importance of questioning assumptions and seeking out knowledge that can be independently verified. Whether or not we agree with their conclusions, the Charvaka philosophy serves as a valuable reminder to think critically about the sources of our beliefs and to value direct experience as a foundation for understanding the world. And that's our lesson on the Charvaka critique of inference and religious testimony. I hope this gave you a clear understanding of why the Charvakas were so skeptical of non-sensory forms of knowledge and how they positioned their philosophy as a bold alternative to other spiritual and philosophical traditions of ancient India. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about other fascinating philosophical perspectives, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next lesson.